Switzerland has spent 2 centuries convincing the world that Swiss-made is the ceiling of what a watch can be. Nobody told the watchmaker in a small Saxon workshop hand-engraving a single component hour after hour onto a watch that serious collectors now rank in the same breath as Patek Philippe and don't mean it as a compliment to Patek. That watch is an A. Lange and Zerna. Prices start around $30,000 and climb past $500,000. It says "Made in Germany" on the back. So does a Junghans you can buy for $350. Same 3 words on the case back. That's the entire gap between pocket change and a house down payment. So here's the real question. Has Switzerland actually been winning this argument or just repeating it louder? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where every major German watch brand lands between those 2 extremes and which one is worth your money. Built to beat the Swiss. To understand why that question even makes sense, you need to understand one man's grudge. In 1845, a Dresden court watchmaker named Ferdinand Adolf Lange came home from years spent training in France, England, and Switzerland with one specific goal: build a German watch industry good enough to compete with the Swiss on their own turf. He took a government loan, set up shop in a tiny Saxon village called Glashütte, trained 15 apprentices, then pushed every one of them out the door to start their own workshops. That wasn't generosity, that was Lange engineering an entire competing industry on purpose. It worked for about a century. Then World War II flattened the factory, the Soviets nationalized whatever survived in 1951, and every watchmaker left in town got folded into one state-owned collective. For 40 years, East German Glashütte built cheap, reliable watches, not competition for anyone. On the other side of the wall, a completely different fight was underway. Pforzheim and Frankfurt built functional pilot's watches. A Black Forest town called Schramberg built something else entirely: Bauhaus, that German design school obsessed with stripping away anything that isn't functional. It ended up shaping half the brands on this list, even though its most famous watch designer wasn't German at all. Max Bill was Swiss, trained at the Bauhaus in Dessau, and in 1961, he designed a watch for a company called Junghans that still looks almost identical today. Even Germany's design revolution had Swiss fingerprints on it. Then, in 1990, the wall came down and Lange's original grudge got a second chance. His great-grandson, Walter, relaunched the company on the exact anniversary of its 1845 founding. The old East German collective privatized into what's now Glashütte Original, and 35 years later, a country that spent half a century locked out of its own watchmaking tradition is putting out watches that make Switzerland genuinely nervous. That's the fight this whole list is built on, not just a price ladder, a rematch. Here's how it plays out, tier by tier. Tier 1, the entry point. Start at the bottom of this fight and you're mostly buying design, not firepower. Junghans anchors the whole tier. Founded in 1861 in Schramberg, it was once the largest watch and clock manufacturer on Earth, full stop. Its calling card today is that Max Bill collection from 1961, $350 to $1,000, and it's the closest thing German watchmaking has to a design icon anyone can actually own. Zeppelin and its cousin brand, Junkers, both come out of a Bavarian company called Pointtec, and both lean hard into German aviation history. Airships for one, Hugo Junkers aircraft for the other. Quartz pieces start around $200, automatics push towards $600, and Junkers chronometer-certified chronographs climb to $2,600. One correction worth knowing: Junkers left Pointtec's hands in 2018. The Junkers family reclaimed the name and builds the watches themselves now out of Munich. Sternsglass is the baby of the tier. A Hamburg brand, a 21-year-old crowdfunded into existence in 2016 because he couldn't afford the watches he actually wanted. Same Bauhaus minimalism, well under $300. Then there's Laco, and this one hits different. Laco was one of only 5 manufacturers cleared to build the Luftwaffe's Bior observation watches in World War II, alongside a name you'll hear again much later tonight, wearing a much bigger price tag. Modern Laco pilots start around $400 and carry that lineage straight through. That's serious history for the price of a nice pair of shoes. Quick pause. If this fight is holding your attention, hit subscribe. It costs nothing, and it's the only reason we keep making these. Tier 2 is where the gloves come off. Tier 2, the enthusiast tier. This is where German watchmaking builds a cult following, because these brands cut out the middleman entirely and sell straight to you. Steinhardt is the poster child. Founded in 2001 in Augsburg, sold almost entirely through its own website, running real Swiss ETA and Salida movements. Its Ocean One diver has become the internet's favorite way to say, I know what a good watch actually costs, for $400 to $600. Archimede runs on different credibility. It's made by Ickler, a family case manufacturer in Pietzheim, building cases since 1924. Buy an Archimede pilot watch for $800 to $2,000, and you're getting a case machined in-house by people who've been doing this for a century, a level of control most brands twice the price don't bother with. Stowa carries real weight too. It's one of those original 5 Luftwaffe pilot watchmakers from Laco's story, run since 1996 by goldsmith Jörg Schauer, who's kept the Flieger line faithful to the World War II originals down to the rivets. Expect $700 to $4,000. Damasco is the engineer's pick, and honestly, one of the sharpest values in this entire video. Founded by an aerospace engineer in Barbing, Bavaria, it builds cases from ice-hardened steel, roughly 4 times harder than standard stainless steel, with anti-magnetic shielding that's genuine soft iron construction, not a spec sheet promise. Small twist, Damasco used to make hardened cases for Sin, one of Tier 3's biggest names, before the two split ways in 2002. Damasco runs $1,200 to $3,000. Circula, out of the same watchmaking town as Archimede, has been building watches since 1955 and got a second life in 2016 when the founder's grandson took the reins. Its dive watches punch well above their $500 to $1,500 price tags. And Bruno Zernla closes the tier out by doing something different. It's assembled right in Glashütte itself, meeting the legal rule that at least half a watch's value has to be added there, even though the brand only launched in 2000. You're paying $800 to $2,500 for a taste of that Glashütte name without the Glashütte price. 6 brands, 1 shared philosophy. Real materials, real engineering, 0 retail overhead. This is the tier most enthusiasts never actually leave, and honestly, they don't need to. Tier 3, over-engineered. This is where German over-engineering stops being a personality quirk and becomes the entire product. Zinn is the clearest case. Founded in Frankfurt in 1961 by a former Luftwaffe pilot and blind flying instructor, Zinn's watches have flown on German space missions and gone to Germany's elite police unit, GSG-9, as actual issued gear, not sponsorship. Its magnetic field protection is tested to function next to industrial machinery, and the brand co-developed Germany's official pilot's watch standard. Most of the catalog runs $1,200 to $2,500. Mühle Glashütte comes from a completely different lineage. 19th century nautical instrument makers who pivoted to wristwatches in the 1990s. Their patented woodpecker neck regulator, named for its shape, and their partnership with Germany's actual maritime rescue service put them at $1,700 to $4,500, with genuine search and rescue credibility behind that number. Union Glashütte, founded in 1893 and revived by the Swatch Group in 1996, sits quietly in the same town as A. Lange and Zerna, offering Glashütte finished movements at a fraction of its neighbors' prices, $1,800 to $3,600. Tutima has one of the wildest stories in this whole video. Founded in Glashütte in 1927, its pilot's chronograph became the official watch of NATO and the German military through the 1980s, and after 65 years exiled in West Germany, it finally moved home to Glashütte in 2011. Most of the range runs $2,000 to $6,000, with in-house calibers pushing well past that. And Junghans' upper Meister line belongs here too, not down in Tier 1. Chronometer-certified pieces, some housing movements once destined for aircraft cockpits, running $1,500 to $3,000. 5 brands, and every single one of them is proving the same point. German engineering doesn't need a Swiss signature to be taken seriously.
Tier 4. Entry Luxury. This is where the word manufacturer stops being marketing and starts being literal. Brands building their own movements from scratch instead of decorating something bought off a shelf. Nomos Glashütte is the standout, and it might be the best design story in German watchmaking. Founded in 1990, just months after the wall fell, Nomos spent 25 years clawing toward true independence and got there in 2015 with the WWII, an in-house automatic movement just 3.1 millimeters thick. Today, the brand handles roughly 95% of its own manufacturing and picked up more than 175 design awards along the way. That buys clean Bauhaus lines with real engineering underneath, starting around $1,900 and running to $5,000 for the more complicated pieces. Then there's Moritz Grossmann, and this is where entry luxury stops meaning cheap. Founded in Glashütte in 2008 by Christine Hutter, who'd previously worked at Lange itself, Grossmann builds its own hands in-house by hand, which almost nobody else on Earth still bothers doing. Its most accessible line, the Autumn, starts around $14,000. Think of it less as a purchase and more as a passport. That's your entry point into Tier 5. Tier 5. High Horology. Manufacture gets thrown around constantly in watch marketing, so here's what it actually means at this altitude. A brand that designs, mills, finishes, and assembles nearly every part of a watch under one roof, including parts most brands never bother making themselves, like their own dials. Glashütte Original is the biggest name here. It's the direct descendant of that old East German state collective, privatized in 1994 and now owned by the Swatch Group, handling roughly 95% of its manufacturing in-house, dials included. The Senator and Panomatic lines run from about $10,000 for a steel Panomatic to $35,000 for a Senator Perpetual Calendar, with the flagship tourbillon pieces crossing $100,000. Moritz Grossmann's mainline work lives here too, above that $14,000 Autumn entry point. This is a company that hand makes its own balance springs, and in one delightfully strange flourish, built a tourbillon whose stop-seconds mechanism runs on an actual human hair. They produce fewer than 500 watches a year. Expect $20,000 to $200,000 depending on complication. And then Dornblut and Cern, quite possibly the most under-the-radar name in this entire video. A father and son operation out of Kalba, a small town in Saxony-Anhalt, using decades-old machinery to hand-build around 150 watches a year, each one assembled start to finish by a single watchmaker. 3/4 plates, gold chatons, hand-blued screws, the whole traditional Glashütte vocabulary for $7,000 to $14,000. Dollar for dollar, it might be the best pure craftsmanship value in German watchmaking, precisely because almost nobody's heard of it yet.
The absolute peak. Which brings us back to where we started, and to the answer to that question about Switzerland. A. Lange and Zuna isn't just the most famous name in German watchmaking, it's the reason German watchmaking has the reputation it does at all. Every Lange movement is built from German silver, an alloy of copper, nickel, and zinc that isn't plated, so it ages and develops a warm patina over decades, the way brass does.
Every balance cock, the small bridge holding the regulating wheel in place, is hand-engraved by a single artisan, and every movement gets assembled twice, once to confirm everything fits, then taken completely apart, decorated, and rebuilt from scratch, by hand every single time. The Lange 1, with its off-center dial, is the signature piece, around $30,000. The datograph, widely considered one of the finest chronographs anyone has ever built, starts near $65,000. The Zeitwerk drops hands entirely for jumping numeral discs and runs past $90,000. The Odysseus, Lange's steel sports watch and its direct answer to the Nautilus and the Royal Oak, trades for $55,000 to $85,000. And at the very top, the Grand Complication, just 6 ever built, sold for close to $2.6 million. This is exactly why collectors call Lange the German Patek Philippe. It's not flattery, it's a genuine rivalry. Patek doesn't take most Swiss brands seriously as competition. Lange is the one German name that keeps them looking over their shoulder 175 years after Ferdinand Adolf Lange first set out to do exactly that. But there's one tier above even that, and almost nobody outside serious collecting circles knows it exists. In Pforzheim, a master engraver named Jochen Benzinger has spent 45 years mastering guilloche, the centuries-old craft of hand engine turning patterns into a dial, using antique machines he rescued when Pforzheim's jewelry industry collapsed around him. He builds roughly 50 watches a year across 3 small labels. His most exclusive collaboration, Grieb and Benzinger, doesn't build new movements at all. It hunts down rare vintage calibers, sometimes from Minerva, sometimes from Patek Philippe or Vacheron Constantin, and rebuilds them from the ground up, hand-skeletonized, hand-engraved, one of a kind. These aren't watches with a price list, they're commissions, and they routinely cross $200,000. That's the ceiling. From a $350 quartz Junghans to a hand-restored one-off Grieb and Benzinger, that's the entire range of what made in Germany can mean on a watch dial. And somewhere in that range, Switzerland quietly stopped being the only country that gets an opinion on what the best actually looks like.
Which tier is yours? So where should your money actually go? Want a real German watch without overthinking it? Buy a Laco Flieger, genuine Luftwaffe pilot lineage for around $400. More history than anything else in Tier 1 for that little money. Ready to buy direct and want the best engineering per dollar in this entire video? It's Damasco. Ice-hardened steel and real anti-magnetic shielding for $1,200 to $1,500 is hard to beat anywhere on Earth, Swiss or German. Want a daily watch with genuine credibility behind it? Zinn's 556. It's the watch that convinced an entire generation of enthusiasts to take German tool watches seriously, and it's still under $1,500. Budget stretching into real luxury and chasing maximum design payoff? Nomos. You will not find better-looking mechanical engineering anywhere near its price, period. And if money has stopped being the constraint entirely, there's only one answer, and you already know it. A Lange and Zerna, specifically the Lange 1, the watch that clawed back from absolute zero in 1990 and made Switzerland's biggest names nervous all over again. Saxony isn't done. So is Switzerland still winning? Watch for watch, maybe. Country for country, that argument isn't nearly as settled as it used to be. Every brand on this list, from the cheapest quartz Junghans to a Lange's million-dollar Grand Complications, is either rebuilding something that was taken away or starting from zero after 1990. 35 years isn't very long to go from a bombed-out factory town to producing watches that make Geneva check over its shoulder. A town of 7,000 people is still adding names to that list. Subscribe, because we're going deep on individual brands from this video soon, starting with the one you're probably already thinking about. Same country, same 3 words on the caseback, 2 completely different definitions of what a watch is supposed to be. Now you know exactly what you're paying for,
and exactly why Switzerland should still be paying attention.